The transport ship shook as it broke through the atmosphere of Kepler 442b. Captain Lisa Martinez gripped the control panel as warning lights flashed across the bridge. Her crew of 12 humans had been traveling for 8 months to reach this distant world. The mission was simple but dangerous. Establish first contact with the native species and secure mining rights for rare earth metals. "Captain, we're getting strange readings from the surface," reported navigator Amy Collins. Her fingers danced across the sensor display. "There are 2 distinct energy signatures. One appears to be organic, the other is definitely artificial." Lisa nodded and studied the data streaming across her screen. The planet looked beautiful from orbit with its blue oceans and green continents. But intelligence reports suggested the inhabitants were not as peaceful as their world appeared. 2 separate species shared this planet and they were at war. "Take us down to the northern continent," Lisa ordered. "Find a clearing near the organic signatures, but keep us at least 5 kilometers away from any artificial structures." The ship descended through thick clouds that sparkled with unusual electric activity. As they broke through the weather layer, Lisa saw something that made her breath catch. Below them stretched vast forests of silver trees that seemed to glow with their own inner light. Among the trees, she could see structures that looked like they had grown rather than been built. "Those must be the elf settlements," said Communications Officer Beth Turner. She had spent months studying the limited intelligence they had gathered about this world. The reports said they live in harmony with nature and use biotechnology. The ship touched down in a meadow filled with flowers that changed colors as the landing thrusters disturbed the air around them. Lisa suited up in her environmental gear and selected a small team to accompany her on the first reconnaissance mission. She chose Amy, Beth, and Security Chief Rachel Morgan. "Remember," Lisa told her team as they prepared to leave the ship, "we're here to make friends, not enemies. These people have been fighting each other for generations. If we can help them find peace, everyone wins." The 4 humans stepped out onto the alien soil. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth's, making each step feel bouncy and strange. The air was breathable according to their sensors, but they kept their helmets on as a precaution. They walked toward the glowing forest, following a path made of stones that seemed to pulse with gentle light. The trees grew larger as they approached, some reaching heights that would dwarf Earth's tallest redwoods. The bark had a metallic sheen that reflected the sunlight in rainbow patterns. A sound made them stop. It was like music, but not quite like any music they had heard before. The melody seemed to come from the trees themselves, rising and falling in complex harmonies that made Lisa feel both peaceful and alert at the same time. "Movement ahead," Rachel whispered into her comm unit. She pointed toward a grove of particularly large trees where shadows seemed to be shifting in patterns that didn't match the wind. 3 figures emerged from behind the silver trunks. They were tall and graceful, with pointed ears and skin that had a slight luminescent quality. Their clothing seemed to be made from living plant material that shifted colors and patterns as they moved. The one in the center, a female with long silver hair, raised her hand in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. Lisa stepped forward and removed her helmet, taking a calculated risk. The air smelled like flowers and rain with an underlying scent that reminded her of Christmas trees. She raised her own hand in response. "I am Captain Lisa Martinez of the Human Federation," she said clearly, hoping their translation devices were working properly. "We come in peace." The elf woman tilted her head and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "I am Aria of the Silver Grove. We have been expecting you, though perhaps not so soon." Her English was accented but clear. "Your arrival was foretold by the ancient trees." Amy stepped up beside Lisa, her recorder capturing every word. "How did you know we were coming?" Aria smiled, and Lisa noticed her teeth were perfectly white with slightly pointed canines. "The trees speak of many things to those who know how to listen. They told us of skywalkers who would come from the void when the 2 moons aligned. They said you would bring either salvation or destruction." "We definitely prefer salvation," Lisa replied with a small smile. "We've heard your people are at war with another species on this planet." The elf woman's expression darkened. "The Kethari, yes. They are not from this world originally. They came here 300 of your years ago in great metal ships that fell from the sky like burning stars. At first, we tried to welcome them as we welcome you now. but they saw only resources to be consumed and territory to be conquered. Beth activated her cultural analysis program. What exactly do they want? Everything, Arya said simply. They strip mine our sacred groves, poison our water sources with their industrial waste, and capture our people for experiments. They seek to understand how we bond with the living world so they can exploit that connection for their own purposes. Rachel's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm. Are we in danger here? Not from us, Arya assured her. But the Kethari have sensors that detect foreign technology. They will know of your presence soon if they do not already. They view any newcomers as either potential allies or threats to be eliminated. Lisa felt the weight of responsibility, settling on her shoulders. First contact situations were always complex, but walking into the middle of an ongoing war added layers of difficulty she hadn't anticipated. What would you ask of us? Help us protect what remains, Arya said without hesitation. Your people are known for their ingenuity and their refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. The trees have shown us glimpses of human history. You have faced extinction before and survived through determination and clever thinking. Amy looked at the recording device in her hands. We'll need to know more about both sides before we can make any commitments, Arya nodded. Of course. Come, let me show you what we are fighting to preserve. The elf woman led them deeper into the forest along paths that seemed to respond to her presence. Flowers opened as she passed, and the musical humming of the trees grew stronger. Lisa realized they were not just walking through a forest, but through a living network of consciousness that spanned the entire continent. The silver forest gave way to a clearing where Lisa and her team saw their first glimpse of elf civilization. Structures that looked like they had grown from the earth itself spiraled up toward the canopy. Bridges made of living wood connected the buildings, and everywhere there was the soft glow of bioluminescent plants providing light without heat or pollution. Hundreds of elves moved through the settlement with quiet grace. Children with bright eyes and silver hair played games that involved coaxing flowers to bloom in specific patterns. Adults tended gardens where food plants grew alongside decorative species in perfect harmony. Everything felt alive and interconnected. This is incredible, Amy whispered, her recorder working overtime to capture the scene. The entire settlement is one big ecosystem. Arya led them to the center of the community where a massive tree rose from a circular plaza. Its trunk was so wide that 50 people holding hands could not have encircled it. The bark showed intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with slow, steady rhythms like a heartbeat. This is the heart tree, Arya explained. It is the oldest living thing on our continent and the center of our neural network. Through it, we share knowledge, emotions, and dreams across vast distances. Lisa approached the tree cautiously. As she got closer, she could feel something like static electricity in the air. How does it work? Touch the bark, Arya suggested. But prepare yourself. Humans process information differently than we do. Lisa placed her palm against the warm, textured surface of the tree. Immediately, her mind flooded with sensations that were not her own. She could feel the contentment of children playing in distant groves, the concern of scouts watching the borders, and underneath it all, a deep sadness that seemed to come from the planet itself. She jerked her hand back, breathing hard. I felt them, all of them, and something else, something in pain. The world's spirit, Arya said sadly. She suffers because of what the Kethari do to her. Every strip mine is like a wound that will not heal. Every poison stream is like poison in her veins. Beth stepped forward with her cultural analyzer still running. How long can your people continue fighting them? An older elf with scars across his arms approached their group. I am Keeper Theron, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. To answer your question directly, perhaps 2 more years if we are fortunate. The Kethari have superior technology and unlimited aggression. We have wisdom and the support of the living world. But those advantages diminish with each passing season. Rachel studied the scar patterns on the Keeper's arms. Those look like burn marks. Energy weapons, Theron confirmed. The Kethari favor tools that cause maximum destruction with minimal precision. They would rather destroy a square kilometer of forest to eliminate one target than risk a single soldier in close combat. Amy checked her readings again. Speaking of the Cathari, our sensors are picking up movement from the eastern mountains. Multiple aircraft heading this direction. Arya's expression became tense. They come sooner than expected. You must see them for yourselves if you are to understand what we face. A sound like thunder rolled across the forest, but the sky was clear. In the distance, black shapes moved against the blue backdrop of the mountains. Even from kilometers away, Lisa could see they were large military vehicles with angular, aggressive designs. How many? She asked. 6 heavy assault craft, Rachel reported using her enhanced optics. Each one could probably carry 50 soldiers plus equipment. Theron touched the heart tree briefly, and Lisa saw his expression change as information flowed through the network. They are not coming here directly. Their target appears to be the Crystal Falls settlement 30 kilometers north of here. Why that location? Beth asked. The falls provide pure water that we use for healing, Arya explained. But more importantly, the crystals that grow there amplify our connection to the world's spirit. If they control that site, they can disrupt our communications across half the continent. Lisa felt a familiar sensation building in her chest. It was the same feeling she had experienced during the Martian Rebellion when civilians were threatened by military forces with superior firepower. Humans had a particular talent for evening impossible odds through creativity and determination. How fast can we get there? She asked. Amy pulled up topographical data on her scanner. In our shuttle, about 15 minutes. On foot through the forest, maybe 2 hours. The Cathari will arrive in approximately 40 minutes, Theron said, after another consultation with the tree network. The settlement has perhaps 300 souls, mostly families with young children. Rachel's training kicked in automatically. Can they evacuate? Where would they go? Arya asked helplessly. This has been their home for over 1,000 years. The crystal caves are sacred to us. To abandon them would be like cutting out our own hearts. Lisa made a decision that would change everything. Amy, get back to our ship and prep the shuttle. Load it with everything we have that might be useful in a defensive situation. Rachel, assess our combat capabilities given the terrain and enemy numbers. Captain, Beth said carefully, we don't have authorization to engage in military action. We have authorization to protect human interests, Lisa replied. And I'm declaring that stopping a massacre is definitely in human interests. Arya stared at her in surprise. You would fight beside us? Against an enemy you have never seen for people you just met? It's what humans do, Lisa said simply. We don't like bullies, and we especially don't like bullies who pick on civilians. Theron stepped closer, his ancient eyes showing new hope. The Cathari have never faced human military tactics. They rely on overwhelming force and technological superiority. What can 4 humans do against 300 aliens? Rachel grinned, and Lisa recognized the expression she wore when someone had seriously underestimated human capabilities. We can introduce them to the concept of asymmetrical warfare. Amy was already jogging back toward their landing site. I'll have the shuttle ready in 10 minutes, Captain. Lisa turned to Arya and Theron. We'll need everything you can tell us about Cathari equipment, tactics, and weaknesses. We also need to know the terrain around Crystal Falls and what resources the settlement has available. There is a problem, Arya said hesitantly. If you help us, the Cathari will consider humans to be active enemies. They will hunt your people wherever they find them. Let them try, Lisa said with a confidence that had carried her through a dozen dangerous missions. They're about to learn why humans have a reputation for being the galaxy's most stubborn species. The thunder of alien engines grew louder in the distance. Whatever was about to happen at Crystal Falls, it would determine not just the fate of one settlement, but the future relationship between 3 species on a world that was running out of time. The shuttle raced through the forest canopy at maximum speed, while Lisa studied the tactical data Arya had provided. The Cathari were reptilian beings about 2 meters tall with armored skin and 4 arms. They used energy weapons that could cut through most materials but required direct line of sight to be effective. Crystal Falls settlement ahead, Amy announced from the pilot's seat. I can see the Cathari ships landing on the eastern ridge. Lisa looked down at a community built around a spectacular waterfall that dropped from crystal-lined cliffs into a clear blue pool. The buildings were grown from living stone and appeared to be extensions of the natural rock formations. It was beautiful and peaceful, exactly the kind of place that would suffer terribly under military occupation. There, Rachel pointed to movement among the alien ships. Deployment ramps are opening. I count at least 200 soldiers in full combat armor. The Cathari forces moved with mechanical precision down the mountainside toward the settlement. Their armor was black with angular edges that made them look more like machines than living beings. Energy weapons glowed with menacing red light along their arms and backs. "Set us down near the falls," Lisa ordered. "Behind that rock formation where we'll have cover." As the shuttle touched down, Lisa could see elf families gathering near the crystal caves, clearly preparing to defend their home despite being vastly outgunned. Children clutched adults, while elders consulted the glowing crystals that lined the cavern walls. Arya and Theron had accompanied them on the flight. Now the elf woman pointed toward the advancing enemy forces. The Cathari always used the same strategy. Overwhelming frontal assault while jamming all communications. They expect quick surrender when faced with superior firepower. "That's their first mistake," Lisa said, checking her equipment. "Rachel, what do we have for weapons?" "Standard sidearms. Plus, I grabbed some mining charges from our cargo hold," Rachel replied. "Not much against military armor, but maybe enough to create some chaos." Beth was monitoring communication frequencies. "They're jamming everything on standard channels, just like Arya predicted. But I'm picking up some kind of harmonic resonance from the crystals themselves." Lisa felt an idea forming. It was crazy and dangerous, but most of her best plans had been both of those things. "Arya, can your people communicate through the crystals the way they do through trees?" "Yes, but not as clearly. The crystals amplify emotions and basic concepts, rather than detailed thoughts." "Good enough," Lisa said. "Here's what we're going to do." She quickly outlined her plan, while the Cathari forces continued their advance. The aliens moved slowly and deliberately, confident that nothing could oppose their technological superiority. Lisa intended to teach them otherwise. The first phase began when Amy used the shuttle to buzz the alien formation at high speed. The unexpected appearance of human technology clearly confused the Cathari commanders. Their neat formations broke apart as soldiers turned to track the fast-moving target. While the aliens were distracted, Lisa and Rachel moved into position among the crystal formations. The mining charges had been modified to create maximum visual and auditory effect rather than destructive force. When they detonated, they sent brilliant flashes of light bouncing and amplifying through the crystal network. The effect was spectacular. What should have been small explosions became a light show that painted the entire valley in shifting colors. More importantly, it sent a message through the crystal network to every elf community within hundreds of kilometers. Humans were here and fighting alongside them. "Phase 2, Lisa whispered into her communicator. Arya and the other elves began their part of the plan. Using their connection to the living stone of the cliffs, they triggered a controlled rock slide that blocked the main path down the mountain. The Cathari found themselves forced to take a longer route that would expose them to crossfire from multiple directions. But the aliens adapted quickly. Their commanders split the force into smaller units and began approaching from 3 different directions. Energy weapons started firing at anything that moved, turning patches of beautiful crystal gardens into smoking craters. "They're learning," Rachel observed from her position behind a boulder. Time for Phase 3. This was the riskiest part of Lisa's plan. Beth had discovered that the Cathari communication system relied on electromagnetic frequencies that were similar to those used by human equipment. With some creative reprogramming, she could inject false signals into their network. "Broadcasting now," Beth reported. "I'm sending reports of human reinforcements landing on the western ridge." The false signals worked even better than Lisa had hoped. The Cathari commanders immediately redirected a third of their forces to counter the non-existent threat. This left the remaining units spread too thin to maintain their overwhelming advantage. Amy brought the shuttle around for another pass, this time dropping canisters that filled the air with thick, harmless smoke. The Cathari energy weapons became much less effective when their operators couldn't see their targets clearly. Working through the confusion, small groups of elves began implementing guerrilla tactics that Lisa had described to them. They used their knowledge of the terrain to appear from unexpected directions, strike quickly with primitive but effective weapons, and disappear before the aliens could respond. One Cathari squad made it to the edge of the settlement before. Lisa intercepted them personally. The alien squad leader was larger than the others, with more elaborate armor and additional weapon systems. When he saw a single human blocking his path, he made a sound that might have been laughter. "You face Commander Vex of the Keth-Ari Expansion Force," the alien declared in heavily accented English. "Surrender now and your death will be quick." "I'm Captain Lisa Martinez of the Human Federation," she replied calmly. "And I don't think you understand the situation." Vex raised his primary weapon, but Lisa was already moving. Humans might not have 4 arms or armored skin, but they had reflexes honed by millions of years of evolutionary pressure and minds capable of rapid, tactical thinking. She rolled behind a crystal formation as energy bolts sizzled past her position. The mining charges she had placed earlier detonated in sequence, creating a cascade of light and sound that disoriented the entire alien squad. When the chaos cleared, Lisa stood over the unconscious body of Commander Vex while his soldiers stared, in shock. A single human had defeated their best warrior using nothing but cleverness and determination. "Now here's what's going to happen," Lisa announced to the remaining Keth-Ari forces. "You're going to withdraw from this settlement and any other elf territories. If you don't, you'll find out exactly why humans have never lost a war we were determined to win." The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. Their overwhelming technological advantage had been neutralized by tactics they had never encountered before. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, the Keth-Ari were facing an enemy that refused to be intimidated. The Keth-Ari withdrawal from Crystal Falls created ripples across the entire planet. For the first time in 3 centuries, the alien invaders had been forced to retreat by a combination of elf resistance and human tactics. Commander Vex remained, unconscious in an elf healing chamber, while his forces regrouped at their mountain stronghold. Lisa stood in the Heart Tree Grove receiving reports from elf settlements across the continent. The Crystal Network had spread news of the victory faster than any electronic communication system could have managed. Hope was growing among the elf communities for the first time in generations. The northern settlements report that Keth-Ari patrols have pulled back to defensive positions, Theron announced, his hand still touching the massive tree trunk. The southern coastal cities say alien ships are returning to their orbital stations. Amy finished her analysis of captured Keth-Ari equipment. Their technology is impressive but inflexible. Everything is designed for overwhelming force against inferior opponents. They have no protocols for dealing with asymmetrical warfare or creative tactics. That makes sense, Beth added, looking up from her cultural studies. According to the historical data Arya provided, the Keth-Ari have never encountered serious resistance. They conquered dozens of worlds by simply landing with superior firepower and demanding surrender. Rachel had been interrogating the few alien prisoners they had taken. "I've learned some interesting things about their command structure. They're not actually a military force in the traditional sense. They're more like a corporate expedition with military equipment." Lisa found this information fascinating. "Explain." "The Keth-Ari Expansion Force is owned by something called the Industrial Collective. Their mission here is purely economic. They were supposed to strip mine the rare Earth deposits and move on to the next target world. Prolonged resistance was never part of their business model." Arya approached the group with news from the Crystal Network. "We have received communication from the Keth-Ari Orbital Command. They wish to negotiate." "That was fast," Lisa observed. "What are their terms?" "They propose a partition of the planet. They will restrict their operations to the southern desert continent if we allow them to extract minerals there without interference." Lisa considered this offer while studying a holographic map of the planet. The southern continent was indeed mostly desert, but it also contained some of the richest mineral deposits on the world. "What do your people think of this proposal?" Theron's expression was troubled. "The desert continent is not uninhabited. Several smaller elf clans live there, adapted to the harsh conditions over thousands of years. To abandon them would violate our most sacred principles. Plus," Rachel added pragmatically, "if we let them establish a permanent base there, they'll eventually expand their operations. This is probably just a delaying tactic while they regroup and plan a more effective assault." Amy had been monitoring space traffic around the planet. "I'm detecting increased activity in the outer system. More Keth-Ari ships are arriving. This might be our only chance to negotiate from a position of strength." Lisa felt the weight of decisions settling on her shoulders again. She had come to this world as an explorer and diplomat, but circumstances had forced her into the role of military advisor and now potentially peace negotiator. The choices she made in the next few hours could determine the fate of two entire species. I want to meet with their negotiators face to face, she decided, but not here and not on their ships. Neutral ground. Beth pulled up satellite imagery of the planet. There's a small island in the equatorial ocean. No strategic value to either side, but it has a flat area suitable for landing ships. Perfect, Lisa agreed. Aria, can you communicate our counter-proposal through the crystal network to their orbital command? Over the next several hours, details were worked out for an unprecedented three-way negotiation. Representatives from the elf clans, the Keth-Ari expansion force, and the Human Federation would meet to determine the future of an entire world. The island turned out to be a peaceful place, covered with unusual purple vegetation and inhabited only by small creatures that looked like a cross between butterflies and fish. Lisa arrived with a small diplomatic team, while Keth-Ari shuttles landed on the opposite side of the island. The alien negotiators were different from the soldiers she had fought at Crystal Falls. These Keth-Ari wore ornate robes instead of military armor and carried themselves with the bearing of merchants rather than warriors. Their leader introduced himself as Trade Director Zach Thule. "We have studied your species during our brief conflict," Zach Thule said in excellent English. "Humans appear to possess an unusual combination of technological capability and tactical innovation. We would prefer to deal with you as partners rather than enemies." Arya had brought several other elf leaders to represent the various clans and settlements. "We have lived on this world for over 50,000 years. It is not a commodity to be divided among off-world interests." "Everything is a commodity," Zach Thule replied matter-of-factly. "The question is simply one of fair market value and acceptable terms of extraction." Lisa realized she was witnessing a fundamental clash of worldviews. The Keth-Ari saw the universe in terms of resources to be exploited and profits to be maximized. The elves saw their world as a living entity with intrinsic value beyond economic considerations. "Let me propose an alternative," Lisa said. "What? If we could find a way for everyone to get what they need without destroying what makes this world valuable?" Both alien species looked at her skeptically. "Explain," Zach Thule demanded. "The Keth-Ari need rare earth minerals for their industrial operations. The elves need to preserve their ecosystem and way of life. Humans need trading partners and allies in this region of space. What if we could develop extraction techniques that work with the living ecosystem instead of against it?" Amy stepped forward with data she had been collecting. Preliminary scans suggest that the mineral deposits are actually part of the planet's biological processes. The crystals that amplify elf psychic abilities are formed by specific bacterial colonies that concentrate rare earth elements. "If we could cultivate those bacteria," Beth added, "we might be able to produce the minerals the Keth-Ari need without strip mining the landscape." Zach Thule's 4 eyes focused intently on the human women. "This bacteria cultivation would be profitable?" "Potentially very profitable," Lisa confirmed. "And sustainable over the long term, unlike strip mining operations that exhaust their resources and move on." Arya touched one of the purple plants growing nearby, and Lisa saw her expression change as she communed with the island's simple ecosystem. "The world spirit suggests this path has potential, but it would require cooperation between our species at a level never before attempted." "Cooperation can be profitable," Zach Thule admitted, "but it also introduces variables that are difficult to control." Lisa smiled. "Control is overrated. The best solutions usually come from letting different perspectives work together toward common goals." The negotiations continued as the purple sun set over the alien ocean, with 3 species slowly working toward an agreement that none of them had imagined possible when the day began. 6 months after the island negotiations, Lisa stood in a laboratory that would have seemed impossible during the dark days of the Keth-Ari War. Elf biotechnicians worked alongside Keth-Ari industrial engineers, while human scientists coordinated the research that was revolutionizing mineral extraction across the galaxy. The bacterial cultivation project had exceeded everyone's most optimistic projections. The tiny organisms that lived in symbiosis with the planet's crystal formations could produce rare earth elements at rates that surpassed traditional mining by orders of magnitude. More importantly, The process actually enhanced the ecosystem, rather than destroying it. Production is up another 12% this quarter, reported Dr. Karen White, the human xenobiologist who had become the project's lead scientist. The bacterial colonies are responding well to the new nutrient mixtures the elves developed. Amy had been promoted to Director of Interspecies Cooperation and now split her time between the surface laboratories and the orbital trading stations. That processed materials for shipment across the galaxy. The Kethari Industrial Collective is so impressed with our results that they're asking us to establish similar operations on 3 other worlds. That's excellent news, Lisa said, reviewing the latest reports from across the continent. The success at Crystal Falls had grown into a network of bio-industrial facilities that provided employment for thousands of elves while generating profits that satisfied even the most demanding Kethari accountants. Arya entered the lab carrying a young elf child who was clearly fascinated by all the scientific equipment around her. I want you to meet my daughter, Luna. She has shown unusual aptitude for communicating with both the bacterial colonies and the Kethari analytical computers. Lisa knelt down to the child's level. Luna had the characteristic silver hair and luminescent skin of her people, but her eyes held a curiosity and intelligence that reminded Lisa of human children she had known. Hello, Luna. Are you interested in science? The child nodded solemnly. The little life forms sing to me when they're happy, and the Kethari machines have patterns that make sense once you understand their logic. She represents something unprecedented, Arya explained. A generation that will grow up considering cooperation between our species to be normal rather than miraculous. Rachel approached their group with news from the security division. Her role had evolved from military advisor to something more like a galactic peacekeeping coordinator. The trade director has asked for a meeting. Apparently, the industrial collective wants to formalize our partnership with some kind of treaty. The meeting took place in the Hearttree Grove, which had become the unofficial diplomatic center for the Tri-Species Alliance. Zak Thul arrived with a delegation of Kethari officials, while Elf Clan leaders gathered from across the continent. The massive tree hummed with activity as emotions and thoughts flowed through the network. The success of our joint venture has attracted attention throughout Kethari space, Zak Thul announced. The industrial collective wishes to propose a formal alliance that would extend our cooperation to dozens of worlds and hundreds of potential projects. Theron spoke for the elf clans. We are willing to share our knowledge, but only if the same principles apply everywhere. No world will be strip-mined. No ecosystem will be destroyed for short-term profit. All native species must be treated as equal partners in any development. These terms are acceptable, Zak Thul replied, particularly given the economic advantages of sustainable extraction. But we require assurance that human military capabilities will be available to protect our joint investments. Lisa felt a familiar surge of pride in her species. Humans will defend our friends and our principles wherever they're threatened, but we expect the same commitment from our partners. Beth had been documenting everything for the historical record. This treaty will be the first formal alliance between 3 spacefaring species in recorded galactic history. The implications are extraordinary, as the formal documents were signed using bioluminescent inks that would remain visible for thousands of years. Lisa reflected on how much had changed since her ship first entered this system. What had begun as a simple first contact mission had evolved into something that would reshape the political landscape of the entire galaxy. Amy presented the final piece of the ceremony, a small crystal that had been grown specifically for this occasion. This contains samples of the bacterial colonies that started our cooperation, along with genetic material from plants native to Earth and minerals from the Kethari homeworld. It's a symbol of what we can accomplish when different species work together. The crystal was placed at the base of the heart tree, where it immediately began to glow with a warm light that seemed to pulse in harmony with the ancient tree's life rhythms. Through the neural network, every elf on the planet could feel the moment when 3 species became something greater than the sum of their parts. Young Luna stepped forward and placed her small hand on the crystal. Her voice carried clearly through the grove as she spoke words that would be remembered for generations. The little life forms are happy. They want to help us reach the stars. That evening, as the 3 sons of the Kepler system painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Lisa stood on a balcony overlooking the transformed landscape. Where once there had been fear and conflict, now there were research facilities, cultural exchange centers, and communities where elf children played with Kethari engineers while human teachers showed them both how to build rockets. "It's beautiful," Arya said, joining her on the balcony. "5 years ago, I thought my people were doomed to extinction. Now my daughter talks about visiting Earth and seeing the Kethari homeworld." "That's what humans do best," Lisa replied with satisfaction. "We find solutions that nobody else thought possible, usually by refusing to accept that any problem is truly impossible to solve." In the distance, the lights of a human transport ship were visible as it prepared to carry the first mixed crew of elves and Kethari to establish a new research facility in another star system. The galaxy was about to discover what 3 very different species could accomplish when they combined elf wisdom, Kethari industry, and human determination. The age of cooperation had begun, and it was more magnificent than any of them had dared to dream.